How to record guitar for complete beginners. I'm working on the assumption that you're also poor, so I'm going to show you the cheapest way to record guitar. I need three things: a guitar, editing software called the DAW, and a way to get my trash song from the guitar to the DAW. In another video, I found a guitar in the trash and I fixed it up, so that's taken care of. Now you need a DAW, so follow these simple steps. Go to purchase Ableton Live, look at the prices, and then decide to do continuous free trials instead. Lastly, I need a way to get my trash song from the guitar to the DAW. If you're going to spend money on one thing in your setup, I would recommend a digital audio interface or an amp with a USB output. However, if you're really cheap or you have an acoustic guitar with no pickup, then it still works if you just want to use whatever microphone you have laying around. Assuming you've acquired Ableton legally, it's time to record. First, go to one of the audio tracks. Then click this button to send your input to this track. Next, go into settings and make sure that your audio input is from the correct source. Then check that the input on the track is from external, and then choose the channel that your audio is coming through. To start recording, click on the circle on one of the open tracks, and then record your silly little song. Now I'll share a couple tips for recording. The first one is to watch out for clipping. If you see the volume turn red and the waveform down here touches the top and bottom, that means the input volume is too loud and it will sound completely trash, like this. Here's what it looks like when I turn down the gain on my audio interface so it doesn't clip. If you actually want the distorted sound, you can add a free digital amp plugin and it'll sound much better than if it was clipping. Second tip, ask your parents nicely to stop arguing. Because it is possible to edit out some background noise, it's always easier when you have a clean recording. This also goes for metronomes, so make sure your headphones aren't too loud and you don't have a beeping in the background of your recording. My last tip for recording is the most important part of playing is getting clean notes. If you can't play something cleanly, I have a couple tricks. You can split it into multiple parts and combine them together, or my favorite is to lower the tempo, play it slowly, and then speed up the recording. Like you, I cannot play this song quickly. But I can play it really slowly. Then I make sure warp is on, and then I increase the tempo. Now it sounds like I can play guitar. If you're thinking that your song still sounds awful and it's time to give up, that might not be true. It's mixing time. Mixing is adjusting the audio to make all the different parts sound good together in terms of volume and frequencies. I'll play a before and after of my last song to give you an idea of what mixing does. Adjusting the volume of an instrument is pretty easy. Just go into Audio Effects and get the utility and place it on top of the instrument. Then adjust the gain knob until it's at a volume that fits well with the other instruments. I'll start with correcting some of the guitar playing. If you open up the audio by double-clicking here, you can see the waveform of your recording. If you play it a little offbeat, then you can correct it here. You can hear I was playing a little bit late, so to correct it, make sure you have warp turned on, and then you can double click up here and drag it around to move the waveform. So I'm going to snap all of my notes to the beat. You want to be careful with warping because you might run into some weird sounds if you use it too heavily like this. You might also think this is weird that I stretched out the sound wave, so that means that it should sound slower, but I heard lots of notes. So I think it's useful to know how this works and how to avoid this, but to keep you Zoomers watching, I'll explain it with Paint and put up some Subway Surfers gameplay. Hello, I am your teacher, Big Max, and welcome to Sound class. Sound is just air getting compressed over and over. The faster it's compressed, the higher it will sound. You can show a sound as a wave, where going up the vertical axis is more compressed, and the x-axis is time. So a taller wave means that it's louder, and a shorter wave means it's a higher pitch. If this is our recording right here, and we want to correct it by moving this point to the left, that means that the wave on the left side will be squished together, and the wave on the right side will be stretched out. And as we just learned, a shorter wave is a higher pitch and a longer wave is a lower pitch. This is a problem in music because I don't want to change the pitch of the note, I just want to change when it happens. Music software can take a different approach whenever you want to move a sound. What Ableton is doing right now is, on the left side, instead of squishing the note, it just deletes whatever it runs over. That way, you still have the same pitch that you started with. And on the right side, it will copy and paste multiple times to fill in the empty space. That will leave the same pitch, but it can cause stuttering if you stretch it a lot. This brings me back to a tip from the beginning of the video, where I suggested record guitar a little bit slower and then speed it up. This also helps with adjusting the recording, because instead of having to slow down the recording and stretch it out, it just goes back to the original speed, and it's easier to manipulate without getting stuttering. Now that you have corrected rhythm and volume, you can fix the frequency profile to make the instrument sound more full, cleaner, and less muddy. What does that mean? Lesson 2, frequencies. And I'll keep the Subway Surfers going so you don't take a nap. Editor Max here. I'm taking a break from adding gain to everything to apologize. It appears I mischaracterized my audience. Also, this ratio is so cool. Anyway, if you're 55 and up, check out the Subway Surfers gameplay. Back to the lesson. I drew the sound earlier as a sine wave, but most sounds are a little more complicated than that. For any sound represented as a function like this, it's possible to represent it as a sum of sine waves. If you want to see the math on that, look up Fourier transformations. From this, we can draw a new type of graph called a spectrum. It still has amplitude on the y-axis, but now the x-axis is frequency, or the length of the wave. The sound on the left would be mostly low frequencies, and the sound on the right would be mostly high frequencies. A typical instrument has a spectrum that looks kinda like this. The peak is the bass note, and then all the smaller peaks are harmonics, which give each instrument its specific sound. In general, you want to avoid having instruments with a lot of overlap. If they do, it's hard to hear the instruments separately, and it can start to sound muddy. Here, for example, I have 4 different instruments playing, but all around the same frequency, so it's hard to tell them apart. Remember how sound is a sum of sine waves? Depending on the phase, they can add to become louder or add to cancel each other out. If they're a similar frequency, we will hear this as a single muddy tone. But if they're 2 different frequencies, we hear it as one tone on top of the other. Here's how to avoid overlapping frequencies. First, choose instrument parts which don't compete in the same frequency space. If I want to have a guitar strumming chords and a guitar playing a melody at the same time, I usually play higher notes for the melody. Here I have 4 different guitars playing, but they're playing pretty different notes, so it's not too hard to hear each one individually. Second is to use EQ. Once every instrument has its own frequency space, you can decrease their overlap with an EQ. This effect is basically a volume knob for specific frequencies. A low-pass filter turns down frequencies above that number, and a high-pass filter turns down frequencies below it. Be careful to not be too harsh, because the harmonics provide a lot of character to the guitar. Third, use saturation. Using saturation will fill empty spaces you have by increasing the volume of harmonics. I usually use a combination of saturation and EQ to get the sound that I want. I hope this helps get you started with recording guitar, and here's the song that I recorded using these tips. Joe's done with the presidential campaign. 4 more years, he won't do it again.
sniff all your friends. Invite over Barack, people won't mock when you fall off a bicycle or trip in the dining hall. Thank you, Joe, you're just much too old, a little late to give up and fold. Enjoy your retirement, you had enough of this. Get out of politics and eat ice cream.